The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Margaret Whitmore had always feared calls that came in the middle of the night, the kind that split the silence wide open and carried news no one should ever have to hear. Her trembling hand found the receiver on the third ring. "Mrs. Whitmore," a voice said, steady, professional. "This is Mercy Hospital. Your son, Daniel Whitmore, has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately." For a moment, the world simply stopped moving. Her robe hung loosely around her shoulders as she stumbled through the dark hallway, the walls blurring through her tears. Outside, Boston slept under a thin layer of frost. The city lights shimmered against the icy pavement as she drove, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, whispering the same desperate prayer, "Please, not my boy." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair. Nurses moved with quiet urgency, their rubber soles squeaking on polished linoleum. Maggie caught her reflection in a window. Wild gray hair, bare face, the stunned eyes of a woman unprepared for the unthinkable. A young doctor appeared, clipboard in hand, his expression already heavy with what he had to say. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began gently, guiding her into a small consultation room. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second a countdown to heartbreak. "We did everything we could. It was a massive rupture. There were no warning signs. I'm very sorry." His words folded the world around her. No air, no sound, just the hollow, endless echo of already gone. She didn't remember signing the papers, or the nurse's hand on her shoulder, or the way her knees gave out when she saw Daniel's wedding ring placed neatly in a small plastic bag. The last time she had felt this kind of pain was when her husband died 10 years earlier. But this was different. Losing a spouse rewrites your future. Losing a child erases your heart. It was nearly noon when Olivia finally arrived. Daniel's wife swept through the double doors in designer sunglasses and a black wool coat, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. A faint perfume trailed behind her. Too elegant, too deliberate for a hospital. She offered no embrace, no tears, just a distracted explanation. "There was traffic," she said, not meeting Maggie's eyes, "and I had to find someone to watch Ethan. I already called his school," Maggie replied softly. "He's staying with the Harrisons today." Olivia's lips tightened. "Oh, well, that's helpful." The silence between them stretched, brittle and cold. Maggie studied her daughter-in-law carefully. The perfectly drawn eyeliner, the steady hands, the lack of red around her eyes. Olivia looked beautiful, composed, almost relieved. "Daniel is gone," Maggie whispered. For a flicker of a second, something real crossed Olivia's face. Shock, maybe even pain. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "He was fine yesterday," she murmured. "We had dinner, and then he worked late in his study. I went to bed early." Her voice caught briefly, but Maggie, ever the psychologist, heard the subtle tremor of guilt wrapped in calculation. Olivia was performing, choosing her emotions like lines from a script. Hours later, while waiting for paperwork, Maggie noticed Olivia step away to make a hushed phone call. She turned her back, speaking fast, her voice low and clipped. "Yes, I understand," she said. "We'll handle the paperwork fast." When Olivia returned, her mask of grief was back in place, flawless. That night, as Maggie sat alone in the dim hospital parking lot, snow began to fall, soft, soundless, relentless. She stared at her trembling hands on the steering wheel, replaying every detail. The calm doctor, Olivia's dry eyes, the whisper about handling paperwork. A chill crawled through her chest that had nothing to do with the cold. Her son was gone, but something about the way his wife had reacted, the timing, the tone, the precision, felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Maggie whispered into the darkness, her breath fogging the glass. "Daniel, if you can hear me, tell me what I'm not seeing." The only answer was the quiet hiss of the falling snow and the echo of her own fear. settling into certainty that this tragedy was only the beginning. The morning of the will reading was gray and brittle, the kind of Boston winter day that made the air sting against your skin. Snow clung stubbornly to the sidewalks as Margaret Whitmore climbed the steps to Bennett & Coder law offices, the firm her son had helped build. Inside, the heat was too high, the air too still. The scent of old books and leather filled the conference room, heavy and suffocating. On the polished mahogany table sat 3 cups of untouched coffee, a folder sealed with Daniel's name, and the man Maggie had known since her son's college days. Thomas Bennett, his closest friend and attorney. Margaret. Thomas greeted her softly, eyes rimmed red behind his glasses. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances. Before she could answer, Olivia swept into the room. Her heels clicked against the floor, a staccato rhythm that seemed to mock the silence. Dressed in sleek black and a diamond bracelet that caught the light, she looked like a woman attending a fashion gala, not her husband's will reading. She didn't sit right away. She took her time removing her gloves, adjusting her hair, and finally lowering herself into the chair across from Maggie with an air of poised entitlement. Let's get this over with, she said, folding her manicured hands on the table. Thomas cleared his throat, his tone turning formal. This is the last will and testament of Daniel Whitmore, executed 3 months prior to his passing. I'll begin with general provisions. Olivia tilted her head slightly, a faint, confident smile playing on her lips. Maggie kept her hands clasped in her lap, her pulse drumming beneath her skin. To my wife, Olivia Whitmore, Thomas read, I leave the lake house property in Vermont, my investment portfolio with Meridian Partners, and my life insurance policy. Olivia exhaled a small breath of satisfaction, nodding slightly. But Thomas continued, to my mother, Margaret Whitmore, I bequeath the family home at 1742 Hawthorne Drive, all vehicles, and my personal accounts at First National Bank. The sound of that sentence sliced through the air. Olivia's head snapped up. What? Thomas didn't pause. Additionally, all educational trusts and guardianship funds for my son, Ethan Whitmore, are to be administered solely by Margaret Whitmore as trustee. Silence. Then a sharp laugh, brittle, disbelieving, escaped Olivia's throat. That's impossible. The house is mine. We bought it together. Thomas slid a document across the table, his tone measured. The deed and mortgage were filed in Daniel's name alone before your marriage. It was never converted to joint property. Olivia's fingers tightened on the armrest until her nails left small dents in the leather. He wouldn't do that. He loved me. Thomas didn't respond. He just lowered his eyes and turned another page. Maggie felt both shock and sorrow pressing down on her chest. Daniel hadn't told her about any of this. He had planned everything quietly, methodically, as though he knew this day would come. And finally, Thomas said, to ensure the continued well-being of my son, Ethan, I appoint my mother, Margaret Whitmore, as guardian and executor of all trusts pertaining to his education and care. Olivia's chair scraped sharply against the floor as she stood. You can't be serious, she hissed. She's 70 years old. You think I'm going to let her raise my son? Maggie lifted her gaze, calm but unyielding. Daniel trusted me, she said softly. He must have had his reasons. Olivia's face twisted, anger barely masked by a trembling smile. Reasons planted by you, no doubt. You were always between us. Thomas intervened quietly. Mrs. Whitmore, this was Daniel's decision, entirely his. The younger woman grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, her perfume slicing through the air like smoke. But just before she left, she turned back, her voice low and venomous. This isn't over. You'll regret this. The door slammed. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Thomas sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry you had to hear it like that. Daniel anticipated conflict. He hesitated, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. "He wanted you to have this privately." Maggie's trembling fingers brushed the handwriting. Her son's neat, precise script. She couldn't bring herself to open it there. Not yet. When she finally stepped out into the cold afternoon, Olivia's black SUV was already gone, tire tracks cutting deep into the slush. The letter felt like a heartbeat in her coat pocket. Back home, she sat at the kitchen table where Daniel used to do his homework as a boy, the house eerily quiet. She unfolded the letter with care. "Mom," it began, "if you're reading this, I didn't make it. There's something you need to know about Olivia. Protect Ethan. I've arranged things so you'll have the tools to do that. Trust your instincts. They've never failed you. I love you." Maggie pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling silently. Her son was gone, but his warning had just brought something else to life, a quiet, cold certainty that this wasn't grief's end. It was the beginning of a war she never asked for, but now knew she had to win. The following weeks turned into a quiet, deliberate chess game. On the surface, Margaret Whitmore appeared frail, grieving, and docile, the image of an old widow too broken to fight. But beneath that calm exterior, her mind was razor-sharp, her every move calculated. She knew that Olivia wasn't mourning Daniel. She was circling, waiting for her chance to strike again. It began with a visit. Olivia appeared one morning, dressed in an elegant beige coat, her perfume filling the doorway. She smiled too brightly. "Margaret, I thought maybe we could talk," she said sweetly, holding a tray of croissants as if they could erase everything. Maggie stepped aside. "Of course, come in." They sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Olivia's gaze roamed across the room, lingering on the family photos. Daniel in his graduation gown, little Ethan on the swing, Maggie and her late husband smiling under a summer sky. Finally, Olivia began, her voice honeyed but firm. "It's been difficult for both of us. I think we can agree Ethan needs stability, a normal home. I can give him that, Margaret." Maggie took a sip of her tea. "He seems stable here. He sleeps through the night now." Olivia's smile tightened. "Yes, but this house, your house, isn't exactly ideal for a child. So I was thinking, maybe we could simplify things. You sign the house over to me, and I'll make sure you can see Ethan. Holidays, birthdays, whatever you want." The words dropped like poison into the air. Maggie set down her cup slowly. "You're very generous, Olivia," she said softly. "But Daniel always told me never to rush into decisions during grief." A flicker of irritation crossed Olivia's face before she quickly masked it with a smile. "Of course, take your time." But Maggie could already see the calculation in her eyes. The mask had cracked, just slightly, enough for the truth to breathe through. That night, Maggie called Thomas Bennett. "She's coming after the house," she said. "I figured," Thomas replied. "We'll need proof, something that shows intent." So the next day, Maggie had new security cameras installed, quiet and discreet. Every visit, every conversation, every smile was recorded. She started keeping notes, too. Timestamps, phrases, odd phone calls Olivia made when she thought no one was listening. Then came the Miami trip. Olivia announced, all charm, "I'm taking Ethan on a short vacation. The ocean will help him heal." Maggie forced a smile. "That's lovely. He could use some sun." But her gut twisted. When Ethan returned a week later, he clung to Maggie's arm, his small voice trembling. "Grandma, Mom left me with a lady I didn't know. She went out at night. I was scared." Maggie's heart hardened. That was all the confirmation she needed. Together with Thomas, she gathered the footage, the messages, and the testimony. One recording, captured by sheer luck, sealed Olivia's fate. A late-night phone call, her voice sharp and impatient. "I told you, Richard, I'm close. Once I get the assets in my name, we'll finally be free." 2 days later, Thomas filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship of Ethan. The court hearing was set for Friday. The courtroom was small but charged with tension. Olivia arrived in a black dress, her tears ready on cue. Maggie came in simple gray, clutching Daniel's letter in her purse. Olivia's attorney painted her as a devoted mother, unfairly targeted by a controlling mother-in-law. Maggie remained silent until the judge asked her to speak. She rose slowly, her voice steady, but thick with feeling. "I'm not here to take Olivia's child," she said. "I'm here because my son trusted me to protect his, and I believe he saw something that none of us wanted to see." Olivia's expression wavered, anger bleeding through her practiced sorrow. The judge leaned forward. "The evidence provided, including recordings and witness statements, shows neglect and intent to transfer assets illegally. Temporary custody of Ethan Whitmore is granted to Margaret Whitmore." The gavel hit the block. Olivia's face twisted, her control slipping. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice echoing across the room. Maggie didn't answer. She simply turned to Ethan, who sat quietly beside Thomas, and reached for his hand. As they stepped out into the cold afternoon light, Ethan looked up at her, his voice small and uncertain. "Grandma, are we safe now?" Maggie squeezed his hand, her heart breaking and healing all at once. "For now, sweetheart," she whispered. "For now." And as they walked toward the courthouse steps, snow began to fall again, soft, silent, and relentless, masking everything in a fragile white peace that neither of them fully trusted yet. Winter thawed into a hesitant spring, but the chill between Margaret and Olivia lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. The court had granted Maggie temporary custody of Ethan, yet she knew the war wasn't over. Olivia had vanished from the public eye, her social media scrubbed clean, her house sold within weeks. Rumors whispered that she had left Boston altogether. But silence, Maggie had learned, was often the most dangerous sign of all. 3 months passed. Life began to find a rhythm again. Mornings filled with the smell of pancakes and Ethan's laughter echoing through the old house. At night, Maggie would sit by the fireplace, reading to him from Daniel's favorite books, the same ones she'd once read to her son when he was 8. Sometimes she caught herself calling Ethan Danny by mistake, and the boy would smile and whisper, "It's okay, Grandma. I know he's still here." But peace never lasted long. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled across the sky, Maggie's phone buzzed. A text message. "Olivia, I need to talk. One last time." Her instinct said no, but something deeper, a whisper that sounded like Daniel, told her to listen. They met the next day at Elmwood Park, under the same maple tree where Daniel used to push Ethan on the swings. Olivia was barely recognizable. The glamorous woman who had once worn designer heels now looked fragile, her makeup smeared by the wind, her eyes red-rimmed. She lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "I'm leaving," she said simply. "Richard got a job offer in the Caymans. I'm going with him." Maggie studied her. "And Ethan?" Olivia exhaled a cloud of smoke that vanished almost instantly. "You can keep him. The lawyers can make it official. I'm not fit to be a mother. Not anymore." The words were quiet, but they cut deep. Not because of cruelty, but because for the first time they sounded honest. "I thought I wanted freedom," Olivia continued, her voice cracking. "But it turns out freedom feels a lot like nothing. Daniel knew what I was, and I hate him for being right. He loved me anyway. That's the worst part." For a long time, neither woman spoke. The rain began to fall, soft and steady, like a benediction. Maggie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. The second letter Thomas had kept for her, the one marked, "When it's finally over." She had never opened it, not until now. She unfolded the paper slowly, Daniel's handwriting neat and certain. "Mum, if you're reading this, then you did it. You protected Ethan. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Olivia isn't your enemy. She's someone who lost herself before she ever found love. Don't hate her. Just let her go. When she looked up, Olivia's eyes were filled with tears. For the first time, there was no mask, no pretense. Only a woman undone by her own choices. "Goodbye, Margaret," she whispered. "Take care of him." Then she walked away, her figure fading into the mist, leaving behind only the faint scent of rain and smoke. That evening, Maggie sat by Ethan's bedside as he slept, one hand resting on his chest to feel the small, steady beat of his heart. Outside, the storm had cleared, revealing a moon sharp and bright above the quiet street. She whispered into the stillness, "He's safe now, Danny. I kept my promise." Years later, the house on Hawthorne Drive had changed. The laughter of a growing boy filled every corner. Ethan learned to play piano, to bake his father's favorite apple pie, and to tell stories with the same vivid imagination Daniel once had. One spring evening, as golden light spilled through the windows, Ethan ran into the kitchen holding a school flyer. "Grandma, I got the lead role in the school play." Maggie smiled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Who will you dedicate it to?" Ethan grinned, his eyes sparkling. "To Dad," he said softly, "because he made sure someone would always put me first." The answer stole her breath. As the curtain of twilight fell over the quiet street, Maggie stood by the window, watching her grandson chase fireflies in the yard. Free, laughing, alive. The promise she had made beneath the sterile lights of a hospital at 2:17 a.m. had finally come full circle. Justice hadn't come from the courtroom or the law. It had come from love, the kind that endures loss, betrayal, and time itself. And in that moment, Margaret Whitmore smiled, knowing that somewhere beyond the stars, her son was smiling back.